to the Off the Shelf series today. Today's topic is mental wellness in trying times. We ask that you keep your microphone turned off during the presentation. That will enable the sound to come through for everyone. And if you are participating via Google Meet, you do have a chat option, and closed captioning may also be turned on in the lower menu bar. After today's webinar, we will email a survey and would like your feedback. So this session will also be recorded and sent to you, each of you who have registered. Today, I will be asking questions of two guests. Sean Morris is from Blomquist Hale Employee Assistance Program. Sean received his master's degree in marriage and family therapy from the University of Southern Mississippi. He's a licensed therapist, a substance abuse professional, and a substance abuse and mental health designated examiner. Sean has worked with Blomquist Hale for 14 years in various roles. And our second guest is Stacy Bernal. She is a TEDx speaker, author, and life coach at See Stacy Speak. She graduated summa cum laude from Weber State University with a BA in communication and is currently finishing a diversity and inclusion certificate from Cornell University. She is the founder of Awesome Autistic Ogden, as well as a 501c3 nonprofit, and she is actively engaged in her community, serving on several boards, including the Ogden City Diversity Commission, the Board of Directors for Weber State University Alumni Association, and the Ogden Weber Technical College Board of Trustees. We received over 200 questions. This was overwhelming, and I appreciate the response. Many of you shared your experiences, your challenges, and concerns, but it would be impossible for us to address the volume of questions we received. So in an effort to touch on as many as we can, we combined or generalized questions to discuss today. And we'll send a list of resources to all the registrants after the webinar that includes contact information and answers to additional questions. So Sean and Stacy, let's jump right in. One of our participants asks, how do I stay positive when all I hear is negative? Before we get into some ways to avoid being mired in negativity, I wanted to ask if it's even realistic to expect that people always feel or act positive. There seems to be a lot of shame in feeling negative, and so maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Is that coming through? Sean, can you hear me there?
Yeah.
Stacy, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
I was going to let Sean take the lead on that. Is he?
Yeah, he's muted.
Sean, dude, you got to unmute.
He's intently staring at us.
Well, then I will be happy to start the conversation. I think it is unrealistic, and we're setting ourselves up for disappointment if we think that we are going to be positive 100% of the time. It's an absolute impossibility to do that. There's the term toxic positivity. I'm sure many of you have heard that sometimes it's too much. It's too much to, yeah, find the silver lining. Yeah, there will be better days ahead, but also feel those feelings of sadness and know that we are in a time where we are all going through some serious hardships, that they are very real, and we need to allow ourselves to work through those feelings and not try to stifle them, right? We are human. We have to work through those. So yeah, I know Sean will have more to add to that, but that's what I have for starters.
Okay. We're going to try to get Sean plugged back in there to us. We can see him, but I don't believe he can hear us, and we can't hear him. So we'll wait for a moment to...
Oh yeah, he says he can't hear.
Ah. Huh. Interesting. Okay.
So Brooke says, I think if you don't vent about things bothering you, tensions can build up to more negative things. Yeah, absolutely. You cannot suppress all of those emotions. Like, we will get to a boiling point where, we gotta get it out. We gotta let it off, whether it's, we don't want to get to a point where it's one huge meltdown. Hopefully we can, let the steam off incrementally. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems logical. And one of the questions I have kind of comes back around to that. How can we hold the negative feelings and experiences on one hand, and then yet avoid letting it hinder us or take over our lives, and prevent us from emerging into a positive sphere?
Yeah. And it is certainly, what are you consuming? What are you surrounding yourself with? I know how easy it is to fall down these rabbit holes of social media, and there's a ton of negativity out there that we can find and we can perpetuate, see and surround ourselves with. So we really have to make the effort to step out of that and start consuming, more positive things, to engage in things that uplift us. I know, for me, it's that I get out of my house, and I know that we're in this crazy time of pandemic and isolation. We also live in a really beautiful place where we can get out and still be distanced and isolated, but get into a good mental headspace. Uh, I see Sean's on now. Can you hear it, Sean? Okay.
Oh, he can hear.
So sorry. I don't know. I was on a call earlier today and no problem. Heard just fine. And of course, our test yesterday heard just fine. So I don't. Sorry about that.
As the saying goes, it's just 2020, right? That's, I think, what we're all saying, which brings me to my next point. How do we find or make meaning and maybe even some humor, right, from our negative experiences? And is this of any value to us?
Yeah, for sure. So, well, humor is of value. And I mean, just like the situation that I can't hear, and I sat in a presentation waiting 5 minutes thinking at some point JJ was going to start talking, and finally saw a chat that somebody said, I don't think Sean can hear you. And I was wondering that myself, thinking maybe I'm not able to hear something. So, we have to be able to find the humor in it and be able to just, there are so many serious and difficult things going on in the world right now, and certainly within our communities. And if we can just try to kind of separate from that from time to time, and allow ourselves to laugh, allow ourselves to appreciate the simple things, there are still so many things around us to appreciate, to enjoy, to have fun with, to engage in, to be positive about. And we have to remember those things. And in many respects, maybe we have to do a better job looking for those things, because what we do hear and what we do see, and oftentimes what our conversations tend to kind of go towards, is all of this stuff that is a little bit negative. But the more we can be recognizing, thinking about, talking about, sharing with others the positive, and like I said, laughing at simple things like I can't hear, and not taking ourselves or others or situations too seriously, that can help us a ton, and is certainly helpful for our mental health and our overall well-being.
Well, certainly, and it's good to be here, hearing voices with us. People are used to have a lot of social interaction, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, and a lot of those outlets have dried up or otherwise been disrupted. I mean, we have online chats and we have video meets, and that's helpful. But it seems like something is still missing. What are some ways that we can regain connection to people?
Yeah, well, there certainly are ways, and it might, require us to be a little bit creative, from what we've done before, and maybe even go back to things that we've kind of forgotten about in the past. One of the ways that I have found, creating a little bit more engagement, is picking up the telephone and actually calling people and talking with them versus, sending an email or a text or some other form of social media, but actually engaging in those ways. Sitting down and writing a letter. I think all of us appreciate when we receive a handwritten letter from somebody. And certainly there's a lot of meaning and a thought that goes into writing that. We also feel a lot of connection and appreciation when we receive that. And so, again, it might mean, hey, go back to some of the things that we've done in the past that not only create meaning for the person receiving the communication, but also create a lot of meaning for us as we're communicating in that form and way. But there are ways still to communicate, and we just have to look for those things and find ways that we can reach out, connect with others. And if we find ourselves kind of getting frustrated or bored or finding that these virtual meetings are kind of wearing us out, find a different way. And there still is ways, we need to be creating some separation physically, but as we all know, we don't want to create that separation emotionally or in our relationships. And so there is still a lot of things that can be done to cultivate relationships, to still have relationships. Even if we're wearing a mask, sometimes we think, oh, we've got a mask on, we can't talk. Well, we can still talk, and finding ways to still communicate, but doing it in safe ways where we're protecting ourselves and others from
Sure.
the situation we're facing.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Now, some of our folks express that they're feeling a little more isolated. They might be new to the area. Relationships are strained or have ended, or their support systems have otherwise broken down in one way or another. This is a difficult time to create new social connections, right? How do we create new social connections in a socially distant world? And I might follow on with that, especially advice for those who might be living alone.
Yeah. Stacey, you want to start with that one?
Sure. And yeah, I think you talk about so many hard things there because yes, living alone or being new to the area where you don't have any connections here and you've moved into a situation where it's difficult to start creating those. So, some of the ideas, and I don't know that this is possible for everyone, but a pet, an animal, I think usually offers some amount of some joy and some therapy there. So if that's a possibility I've heard that adoptions are kind of through the roof right now because people are home. If they do get a new animal, then they are there to train it and take care of it and make sure there's not a ton of accidents. So that would be a suggestion. There are still ways that we can connect, and yes, in virtual ways, but I have found that I've gotten into a lot of Facebook groups that kind of align with my interests, my passions, and I've met people from all over the country that I wouldn't have otherwise met. And we've had phone calls, we've had conversations. And so while they're distanced and they are virtual and they're different, I still feel connected. I still feel this sense of like, okay, I'm not alone. There are others out there who are kind of in the same space I'm in. And there are still ways we can safely get together. So I had some girlfriends and we did that, went to a big parking lot and opened the backs of our cars and we sat there and had coffee in the morning. So there are ways that we can do those, be connected and be safe at the same time.
Is that some creative ways? Yeah. Yeah. It seems like. Oh, did you have something, Sean?
I would just say, one of the things that is kind of coming out, and it's kind of a kind of a funny way to look at it, but kind of finding a COVID buddy. When we find ourselves alone, recognizing that many others are feeling that way too, and finding those, and it maybe does, require us to reach out a little bit. But as we take that risk and reach out and maybe reach out to somebody who we also know might be alone or maybe, having some difficulty in the current environment and kind of reach out and maybe it's a new relationship or maybe it's just continuing a current relationship, but finding ways to say, hey, let's try to connect each day and, take a few minutes just to check in with each other and then deepen those relationships, really, trying to, ask, hey, how are you doing? And really trying to be in that moment to support each other, hear each other, and really be able to, provide that connection that so many people are looking for. But again, so many of us are finding ourselves in those positions where we need, that relationship. And so finding others who are in kind of similar places and reaching out can be a great way to, overcome your own, but also help somebody else in the process.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It seems like the longer this isolation persists, a lot of people express that they're getting anxiety, anxiety maybe where it didn't exist even before. How do I create a calm, peaceful space but avoid slipping into anxiety over something as simple as maybe going to the grocery store? Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, I certainly, there's so many things that are creating anxiety, as mentioned, JJ. Even going to the grocery store, those types of things. But as we kind of take a step back, as we try to do those healthy activities, those things that we know help us to feel better. Taking a break. Getting up and moving around. A lot of us are spending a lot of time behind a computer, and getting up and moving around a little bit between calls and between virtual meetings and those types of things. Limiting our screen time certainly can help us reduce the anxiety that we're feeling. Avoid multitasking, just kind of, okay, hey, I'm going to put all my energy right into this one activity right now. I'm going to let some other things go. And maybe we even need to prioritize how we're going to do those things within a given day or a week or what have you, but really be able to focus on one thing at a time and kind of be in that activity or that project without other things that we're worried about. Also, identifying, well, what are our responsibilities and what are just the activities that create a lot of busyness maybe around that. And then a lot of self-compassion, doing things such as making sure we're getting enough rest, making sure we're getting some exercise and physical activity, connecting with others, eating good meals, and doing things that we really enjoy, doing things that allow us to kind of separate from the anxiety, the worry, the fears, whatever those are, to really be able to kind of be in a moment doing those things that we find enjoyment in. All of those, and certainly many other things too, are great ways to help us kind of, manage the anxiety of all this and navigate to the very best of our abilities. Stacey, other things you'd add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think we really need to kind of get back to reconnecting to ourselves, which, sounds kind of woo-woo, but there is so much power in meditation and yoga and breathing, because anxiety is a real thing and it can feel debilitating, this not being able to breathe and this weight on our chest, and the idea of going into a grocery store and it's feeling so heavy just to do that. So, taking the time to center. And I think, even when we're going through the grocery store and we're all masked, we can still make eye contact and smile through that mask. I really think that we can still do that because we're losing our humanity to a certain extent. So smile through that mask.
That's a good point. I want to bring that out. I was surprised that other people have very similar experiences that I'm having, that they are perceiving our community as a much meaner place than it once was. I hear stories and have experiences of increased divisiveness, irrational outbursts, and as well as more calculated attempts to dehumanize other individuals. How do we rationally defend ourselves and our loved ones from these attacks, whether they come from strangers, friends, or even close family members?
Yeah, take that one. Let's start, Stacey.
Sure, I'll start with that. So the key word that you use there is rational. How do we rationally do that? And it's hard to do that because we're all coming from these emotional states. I recommend this book, Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown. So if anyone's familiar with that, but especially with on top of a pandemic, on top of the earthquake we had in March, on top of homeschool, everything else that we've had going on, then we have this election year. And then we're seeing just a ton of, like you said, divisiveness. And we're seeing it maybe in places we hadn't expected, and with people that, we assumed we were on the same page, and now we're finding out we're not. And there is an element of there's a lot of sadness there. There's heartbreak. We have to mourn that. And there is a loss of relationships for a lot of people. So it is hard to do that from a rational space. And we are being dehumanized. And it's hard because we're doing it on both sides. We find ourselves, categorizing a group one way, and then we're being categorized another way. And we're like, well, that's not me. I'm not that, I'm that kind of person. I'm not that kind of person. And knowing that people think that about me, it's really upsetting. You have to pick your battles. What are you willing, as far as, engaging? Do you want to have the conversations with your family and friends that are going to be hard and uncomfortable, or do you want to disengage? I would say with strangers, and particularly if it's in the social media space, I would say don't put your energy in that. I know that, I see things and I have to just, that's not my battle. I can't put energy into that, because otherwise it will, ruin my day, my week, and I'm not going to allow that. So you have to set up those boundaries for yourself. What is it that's important to me? And if it is, the family and friends, are the relationships worth it? I guess is kind of, which is a sad, hard truth. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really like, what Stacy just shared there, and particularly that part about relationships in the, is relationship really the priority, or is somebody's perspective, and trying to, decide, do I agree or disagree with them? And is it okay to disagree and still maintain healthy and strong relationships, even with people who maybe see the world or certain situations a little differently than I do? And I think for those who have families, it's a great opportunity to teach our children. This is such a challenging time, and certainly that can't be understated. But at the same time, it's tough. But it's a time that we can really help our kids learn and help them really develop some great abilities to navigate in a real, challenging world, but develop a lot of strength and a lot of character, and really identifying, these different feelings and these different situations, and really communicating through how can we, stay, positive. How can we look for the good? How can we still cultivate and enjoy and thrive with relationships and make meaning out of relationships? And how can we succeed even with people who we have differences with, and really developing, those opportunities to, just create great character and leadership traits within ourselves and in our families.
Sure. So do you have any good resources that you would recommend for learning to communicate better with those we disagree with, especially?
Yeah, so one thing that, certainly we're all aware of, yet sometimes we maybe think, oh, what are all those resources? But even just online, there are so many great resources about just how we improve communication, how we, overcome differences, those types of things. So always, just which I think we all do quite regularly anyway, but Google those kinds of things and find those resources that really are meaningful and really kind of fit within, your framework and really what really, makes sense for you. Stacey, other thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it's kind of back to, what's important to you, and is it that you need to pick up the phone and have a conversation with your mom that's going to be, maybe a hard one you don't want to have. Being willing to have the conversations and look into resources or ways to communicate, because we all have different communication styles as well.
Sure.
So you might need to, figure out kind of how to speak another person's language. But
Yeah. I find for myself, after being cooped up for some time, I get pretty irritable. And I was noticing that other people have expressed similar sentiments. How can we better prepare ourselves to respond to irritability at home, or prevent ourselves from taking our angst out on another individual?
Yeah, so one of those things I think that's really important is that we begin with that self-compassion. we have to first take care of ourselves. We've got to do those things that allow us to relax, allow us to still enjoy, allow us to find happiness. Because certainly when we're feeling and thinking those ways, it's much easier to engage and interact with others. Yet at the same time, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to, be a little snappy. We're going to be in a bad mood. We're going to say things that maybe we wish we hadn't had said. And when we do those things, it's important that we apologize, that we recognize, hey, I made a mistake, and we pull those people in that maybe we're snappy with, and just let them know that, hey, we're sorry, and for whatever reason, came across the wrong way, but I value you, I appreciate you, and certainly working on continually trying to do this better. But like I said, I think taking care of ourselves is really important. And again, back to kind of some of the stuff we said before, but limiting stuff that we know creates a lot of anxiety within us, or frustration. We can't bury ourselves with all that stuff that creates a lot of difficulty for us, not take great care of ourselves, and then feel like, well, I'm going to be on the top of my game all the time in interacting with others. It just doesn't work that way. So practicing those good behaviors, and then, being quick to apologize when we maybe trip over ourselves.
Okay, great. That's a lot of this is really enlightening to me. So some of the difficulties that we've been talking about are fairly common experiences right now. A lot of people reported in our survey that they're feeling anxiety or depressed. They're feeling some depression or symptoms of depression that they haven't felt before. What are some signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression, and how would I recognize when either I or someone I care about would benefit from some professional help?
Sure. So we, can see signs of depression, anxiety, those types of things, and certainly changes in our mood, changes in our behaviors. Maybe we're using alcohol and we hadn't before, or we're using more alcohol than we historically have. Changes in our sleeping patterns. So anything that we see that this is a significant change, and unfortunately it's a change. It's not a change for the good. It's change that's causing more difficulty for somebody, more worry, more of those negative things that we'd be able to recognize. So as we see those things, those are warning signs for us, maybe warning signs also for others around us to ask and say, hey, how are you doing? And I think it is important for all of us, as we recognize those things within others. That's one of the things I think that hopefully we're learning through this is, people are struggling, and yet we all could help. And by just asking simple questions like, hey, how are you doing? Or, hey, I noticed that you didn't seem to be yourself yesterday or the last couple of weeks. How are you? And then just doing a lot of listening. Once we ask those questions, we really don't have to have anything really magical as far as what we do from there. But a lot of it's just listening. A lot of it's being supportive and helpful, encouraging, and so forth. I'm sorry, JJ, you asked a second part of that question. Remind me of that second part.
How would I recognize when someone could benefit from professional help? At what point do I say, I need to talk to a professional?
Yeah. So I'm a licensed therapist, and so I think people can benefit from professional help at any time, and I don't think it has to be at a certain point that you say, okay, hey, that now you need professional help. We all need engagement, interaction with others, and however we find that is certainly part of the key. But even if we're just dealing with mild symptoms and saying, hey, gosh, could I benefit from talking with a therapist? Yes, probably so. And not to say that that's the avenue you need to go to versus anything else. But if that's an avenue that you would like to explore, I would encourage you to do that. One of the challenges we have in our society is that there's so much stigma around talking to a professional. We know we all need interaction. We all know we all need help sometimes navigating through challenges and difficulties and everything we're going through now. And yet at the same time, we have this stigma about talking with people, and particularly stigma about talking with a professional therapist, who might be able to help us, and yet it's really such a part of life. Is engaging and talking through our feelings and unloading stuff that we might be carrying around with us. And so, I would encourage you to reach out and talk and even talk to professionals, and do that early and often versus waiting for it to be a crisis situation where you think, oh, now I maybe will turn to those resources. And
Yeah,
we become more comfortable and common with it, that's certainly going to be good for us individually,
sure.
collectively.
This is probably a good time then to talk about employee assistance program. You work, Sean, you work for Blomquist Hale, which is the state's employee assistance program. This is available to employees. Can you talk a little bit about what those services are and how an employee would go about hooking up with that, connecting with that service?
Yeah, you bet. So yeah, all state employees, whether they have benefits through PHP or not, have available professional counseling resources through Blomquist Hale, through a program called the Life Assistance Counseling Program. This benefit started back in 2006, and the only, recently PHP, and because I said it extends to all state of Utah employees, regardless of whether or not they have PHP coverage, and that's an update. That's a new change. PHP has extended this benefit now to, again, all state employees. And so, yeah, it's a wonderful resource. It's easy to access. All you got to do is make a phone call to the number. That's 801-262-9619 or 800-262-9619. And then we have support staff answering the phone around the clock, and they will help you get connected with a therapist. You can see somebody in office, or you can have a virtual appointment. And it doesn't cost anything. It's completely confidential, and it's for the employees and their family members as well. So it's a wonderful benefit, and encourage everybody to take advantage of that. Like I said, all the the barriers are really removed there. So don't hesitate to reach out if that could be a helpful connection in any way, shape, or form.
We'll provide that resource to all of the attendees today. We'll send that out, the contact numbers and so on. So that's very helpful. I understand this is a difficult time to find an available therapist. They're pretty busy. How does a person go about finding a therapist or a counselor to talk to? This was a big question that came up for a lot of folks. It's an intimidating process if you've never done it. How do I go about doing that?
Yeah, so I certainly would just encourage all of you to use that benefit that I just described, through the partnership with the state, PHP, and Blomquist Hale. And as I said, just reaching out, calling that number, you'll talk to a support staff who will help you get connected. And then the other part, kind of along those lines is finding the right fit. And there is a little, certainly there's a fit to connecting with a therapist. Some of that's personality related, maybe a lot of that's personality, and just sharing and trying to kind of identify the things that you're looking for, and having help, whether it be support staff help, or you can certainly talk to a therapist and say, hey, just trying to kind of see who you are, what you're like, to see if that connection would be a good fit for me, and then from there, give it a shot. And if you find that it's not the right fit, don't give up. Just you can certainly share with that therapist, which I realize a lot of people are uncomfortable doing that, but can certainly share back with that organization or back with us as Blomquist Hale, and just say, hey, that wasn't the best fit for me. Could I try a different person, or maybe I want to try somebody of a different gender, or maybe I need somebody who's a little bit more understanding with these particular things that I'm looking to get some help or understanding with. So yeah, so just don't give up, and just realize that one fit or connection that may or may not be the right one for you.
Right.
Just let's try another one.
Okay, thank you. And Stacy, you mentioned specifically meditation, yoga. I'm wondering, and some of our folks asked, are there are there other self-care or alternative practices that have been effective for people suffering from specifically symptoms of anxiety and depression?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Sean was talking about as far as finding a therapist, and then I'll answer that. But the number one thing I want to say is don't feel like you should be strong to do things on your own. You shouldn't need a therapist, right? I know that throughout my own journey, in battling my anxiety and depression, I kind of would have this self-talk, like, no, Stacey, you don't need that. You're strong enough to work through it on your own. Don't discount the power of having that therapist and having someone to talk to, and the power of being able to get out these feelings and emotions that you're having. I think right now it's so necessary. You're not burdening people. You should be taking advantage of that. So I know there's such a stigma around mental health. So again, my own journey is that I ran my first marathon in 2009, and prior to that, I talk about how I hit this rock bottom, and kind of this was at my lowest point in my life. I didn't realize how much running kind of saved me, and I realized later. And I'm not saying that everyone has to go run a marathon. That's not what I'm. But the physical activity and the kind of the mental part that was associated with that too. So that I find that so powerful, and it's that body, mind, spirit connection. So whatever you can do, if it's, going for a walk around the block, if it's getting up 20 minutes early and popping on a YouTube video of a meditation or a yoga session, but it's just that, that little bit of time that you can kind of quiet out the world, get into your place of silence and solace. And, I know a lot of us have families, and whether we're working at work or if we're at home, however that looks, it's chaotic. And we can't go through the whole day in this space of everything just kind of feels heavy and angsty. So yeah, we gotta, however you can fit it in, 5 minutes of breathing, 15 minutes of, and there's a ton, you can go on YouTube and find a ton of meditation and yoga. But yeah, that physical activity and finding some quiet space for yourself.
Okay, yeah, so I don't have to be all in on an expert in some sort of methodology, right?
Yeah.
So I'm finding not everyone has been as adversely affected by the recent events as others have been. It seems like it might be difficult for some people to even understand the difficulty that others are having, and that causes some friction. How can I best communicate these struggles with others, but particularly in the workplace where the subjects might be taboo?
I'll start that one, Stacey.
You want me to start with that one?
Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's so interesting because, in fact, some of these topics that are taboo, some of them are like, they're illegal. You're not supposed to be talking about them in the workplace anyway. And the issues are that we are starting to realize that maybe people we work with, we don't have the same perspective. We don't see things the same way. And so then now we have this discomfort and disengagement in our workplace. And we have this other level of, oh my gosh, I don't necessarily feel like I fit in here. And we as humans want nothing more than to have a sense of belonging. We want to know that we are where we are supposed to be and surrounded by the people that we're supposed to be with. And so to have these this cognitive dissonance and this discomfort in our workspaces, it's hard. And it kind of goes back to, are we willing to have uncomfortable conversations? Are we willing to, have the energy to share our perspective with someone else? Is it an issue that needs to be escalated through management? What does that situation look like? And you have to kind of create your level of comfort in your work environment, which we're in a really weird, hard time to be doing that. So, Sean, I don't know, you probably have more kind of mental health tips around that.
No, I thank you. I think what you shared was fantastic. And at the same time, really checking in with each other. Again, we all know this, but we ask each other, how are you? Or, this type of thing, and it's fine kind of stuff. And And I think in times like these, really being able to create that connection and being able to ask, hey, how are you, with a willingness to listen to a response. And, that may surprise people when we say, no, I'm curious, how are you doing? But then being able to be open to how people think, how people feel, and not judging each other because of that, but having compassion, having understanding, having a lot of empathy. I think one of the things that, this whole pandemic and everything else that's gone on in 2020 is it's brought out that, all of us are a little bit different and we see the world differently. And the more we can appreciate that and understand that and have empathy for that, and realize that, we all come from diverse backgrounds, even if maybe, maybe if we're even the same gender, have the same color of skin, we certainly have different backgrounds, and being able to appreciate all of that and learn from that. And so, whatever those subjects are that, could be taboo, and certainly there are some, and as Stacy said, some of them we need to be a little bit careful in a work environment, how much we might discuss some of those things, that there might be better places to discuss some of those. But at the same time, again, just having a lot of empathy. And if we're a supervisor or a leader of employees, really being able to support them and have a lot of empathy for how they're thinking, how they're feeling, and really checking in on a pretty meaningful level with how they're doing.
So let me ask you then, Sean, if I'm a supervisor, or even a colleague, and I'm noticing some behaviors or just symptoms exhibiting themselves in a fellow employee, uh, are there some tips for how I address that or respond to that?
Sure. Yeah. I think that's something we should be doing. If we're a leader of employees, and we recognize some things, just as you mentioned there, is to, in a confidential, private way, pull them aside, bring them into an office or meet with them in a place that can be private, and just say, hey, how are you doing? And if the employee says, well, what do you mean? How am I doing? You can certainly use some examples to say, well, over the last, period of time, whatever, I just noticed this, and I'm concerned. I want to make sure you're okay, and obviously conveying that message that, hey, I care about you, and that is something that we all strive for. We want to hear that people care about us, and if nothing more, even if you don't say the words, hey, I care about you, just by asking the questions, because all of us know when we're struggling, and sometimes when we're struggling, we think, why isn't anybody recognizing, why isn't anybody asking me, hey, how are you, in a real meaningful way, versus just the passing in the hall. So I encourage that from supervisors, and really doing that proactively.
Thanks. And let me take it from the maybe employee's perspective. If things are unpredictable right now, if I genuinely perceive an unrealistic demand coming down on me, or some sort of edict, or I just increased workload, we're short-staffed on a number of angles, how do I address this without being viewed as a complainer?
Yeah, great. Certainly a great question. And again, I think that's where we just have to have understanding with each other, and talking out loud. We all are feeling, at least I think the majority of us are feeling, just a lot of pressure and a lot of things, not only because of what's going on in a work environment, because of some of the stuff on the outside that then comes into the work environment with us. And it just feels like we're carrying a lot around all the time. And so being able to talk about that, and as I mentioned earlier, being able to be understanding and have empathy, and hear what other people are thinking or feeling, and being open to that. And certainly there's an approach that we all probably are aware of, when, hey, I'm talking about something because I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling burnt out, versus I'm just trying to complain, or I just want to complain. And so, really being mindful of our own approach to it. But, if we really are feeling overwhelmed, whatever those situations are, everything we've been saying up to this point, it's important to be addressing that. And so we need to be talking about those feelings and thoughts. And then, like I said, we need to hopefully, if we're now one receiving that information, we need to have compassion and empathy for it, and see if there are things that we could do to make some adjustments to help. Or oftentimes, it is just that I know there's nothing that can be done. I know this is just stuff I've got to work through, but it really helps me just to unload it and be able to share it with you. So thank you for listening. So kind of 2 ways there.
That's helpful. Yeah, I want to talk about some challenges of supporting others. As some folks listening today are uncelebrated first responders, overwhelmed. Maybe they're providing elder care, juggling erratic school demands, or supporting individuals with substance abuse, physical or mental illness, that all of those things have been exacerbated, right, by recent events. How does a person carve out personal space for well-being while still not neglecting the needs that they're supposed to be providing, whether it's for family or even services that are delivered through their job?
Yeah. Stacey, you want to start on that one?
Yeah, so we talked about this. I know many of you have probably seen, I'm pretty sure it's a meme, but it says we're all in the same boat. And then the matter is, we're not all in the same boat. We're in the same storm, but our boats might be looking very different right now, right? Because some of us do have these other added responsibilities. So back to what Sean was saying, that whole the self-care and having to put ourselves first. So that might look like I need to get up 2 hours earlier in the morning, or figuring out a way that you do have to carve out that space. I have a special needs son, and it is a matter of, I know I have to take this time, and it's not selfish. It's not selfish of you to invest in the self-care. You need to do that so that you can stay in the right mental space to be able to deal with these extra responsibilities. So that would kind of be my advice, is that, and recognize and accept, and it's okay. Don't compare your situation to other people's. And again, we're in the same storm, but we're in different boats. So
I like that analogy. That's and that's helpful. What are some tools that you might provide? I mean, I certainly want to end our discussion today on positive notes. What are some tools to keep us from just being swept up by the despair around us? I mean, it's difficult to watch the news. And the first thing out of our mouths when we meet up with somebody is, hey, what are the COVID numbers today, right? What are some ways to keep from being swept up in this despair?
Yeah. Well, I think it's part of what you just shared there, and that is, we need to kind of identify where we're feeling overwhelmed. What are some of those things that are causing us to feel, overwhelmed and the sense of despair? And when we identify those things, finding kind of ways to reduce it a little bit. If we're finding that, gosh, I watch a lot of news and yet it kind of makes me irritable. Well, we want to reduce the amount of news that we're taking in. So whatever those different things are, and then, finding ways to, engage with the things that we enjoy and the things that we love, and really being able to enjoy those other things, as we kind of said, earlier in the discussion here today, is, look for those things that create a lot of positive and create a lot of happiness. And those things are around us and are there, and finding, making sure that we're engaging in as many of those activities as we possibly can, so that we're not just feeling the feelings of being overwhelmed and the discouragement and despair. And maybe we even practice a little bit, and rather than talking about what are the COVID numbers today, maybe we talked about something that we really enjoy talking about. Hey, did you see the game last night? Or different things that maybe kind of change where we often are focusing right now, but trying to look for other things, or recognizing positive things that we're seeing go on around us, and identifying and sharing those. And we know that contributes in a lot of ways. When we're sharing something positive, it certainly is contagious with others, and helps us all to have a little bit more hope and a little bit more optimism.
Sure. Yeah. I didn't know that we'd have time to get into this, but I want to bring this up as well, maybe some pointers you have. I think most of us are oriented to a society where we're goal-driven, objective-driven, right? And SMART goals, as we teach in leadership development, have a very important component in target dates. And all of a sudden, target dates are difficult to reach because there's so much uncertainty. We don't even know when we will be able to perform certain aspects of our jobs or of whatever it is we're trying to achieve. How do we set goals when we can't set reasonable target dates? Or is that important? Do we just throw it all out? Or what are some pointers you have for that?
Yeah. Jace, I really liked your thoughts on this. Do you want to share some of?
Yeah, I think we are in a society where we're goal driven, personally and professionally, and absolutely, we still need to have those goals. We still need to feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that we have something we are working toward, and we also have to have flexibility and realistic expectations about when we might get to that end goal. And we have seen this year that we've learned to pivot. I think that's been the word of the year, is pivot. So how do those goals look going forward, and can we be flexible in when we get to them? So, absolutely. And especially as we're coming into this new year, like I'm a big proponent of vision boards, and my vision board for this year is a joke. But I had to accept that it was things that were out of my control, obviously, right? That I wasn't able to do everything, but they're still on the vision board. My goals are still there. They will eventually happen. So I think we have to, same thing in our work world is you always have to have the goals. Absolutely.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add, Sean, or?
No, I really just agree with what Stacy just shared there, and that is having those still making those goals, but being flexible in the time frames that we might be able to and yet at the same time, again, having that self-compassion that if whatever kind of something interrupted our ability to achieve that goal, is not to be deflated, but recognize that, hey, we gave it a good effort, and we can kind of make some adjustments and keep working towards it. But some of the things are so out of our control. Some people have goals, of which I would encourage, of having a goal just to go on a maybe it's a vacation that you're looking forward to, and depending on what type of vacation that might be, you may not even have any ability, any control over whether or not it can happen. But it's something you might find hope and be excited looking forward to, which is still so positive.
Sure. That's quite helpful. We're winding up our time here. Just to ask each of you if you have, Stacy and Sean, if you have any closing remarks before we wrap things up here, of things that you would recommend for folks.
I think that there is, kind of depending on where each of you are at in your own journeys, and kind of what's important to you. Because I think part of what's come out of this year is that we've all kind of learned some things about ourselves, and we may have learned some things that have surprised us. And, what's important to you now, and what do you want to really get into moving forward, into kind of creating the world that you want to see. So I would say that there are a ton of resources, kind of, either way, if this is a whole other conversation, but kind of around, social causes that we might be getting passionate about. So anyway, I would say follow your heart. And my last bit of wisdom is that this too shall pass. This is a hard, mucky time for so many people, but I'm sure we've all been through hard things, and I believe we will get through this. So I'm just, wishing you all the best.
Thank you.
And I would, certainly, first off, thanks to all of you. We know that there was a great interest in having this discussion and participating and listening. And so thank you for being interested and taking interest in your own well-being and your own mental health. That's something that we all have to do, and recognize that, hey, we got to keep, finding ways and overcoming, the challenges and finding the good and feeling good about ourselves and our situations and so forth. Certainly applaud all of you that are doing challenging things, being those first responders, taking care of family and loved ones, navigating children in school, and all the almost day-to-day changes that are going on with that. So again, we just thank you. And then somebody just said, we're all in this together, and we certainly see billboards about that. We see signs, we see it come across, TV commercials, so on and so forth. And really, if we can really connect with that we really are all in this together. And as all the difficulty and negativity that 2020 has brought, and we've certainly, addressed some of that, but also look at the good and recognize that hopefully through this, it's helping us, if we look at it this way and take this as that opportunity to become more connected, to become more helpful to one another, to have more empathy, to have more understanding, to accept differences. That can be such a wonderful thing. And it can, like I said earlier, it can really make, not only for us personally, but our families, our children, if we have children, really be able to grow through this experience. And a lot of that's going to come from kind of our attitudes with it. If we can be hopeful, if we can, be optimistic, if we can look forward to, what good is coming from this and what better things are ahead. And at times it's hard to think and feel that, but when we can, remember that, hey, we're doing okay, and we're gonna, things are gonna get better, and overcome the real struggles that so many have really gone through this year, but have that look for the future, that can just do wonders for us personally and wonders for others as well.
Thank you. Stacy, Sean, it's been a pleasure to chat with you today, and would like to remind everyone that we will be sending out resources, additional resources. There are a few questions too that mostly were of a technical nature and so on that will be answered in the follow-up email as well. And be looking for the rest of our off-the-shelf series to continue in the new year. This is the final one for 2020. So 2020 will begin soon. Be looking for that, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you all, and have a great day and great and happy holidays. Take care.